Snow blanketed the valley, muffling every sound. A widow trudged through the drifts, her children waiting in a cabin with hollow stomachs. Clutched in her hand was her last treasure, a thin gold ring, worn from years of love and loss. Desperation drove her steps toward the smoke rising in the distance. Her name was Clara. Life had once been filled with laughter, a husband's strong arms, children's bright smiles. But tragedy had struck, leaving her alone to carry the weight. Hunger gnawed at her family, and though her pride screamed to endure, her children's cries broke her. She would trade anything to feed them. At the edge of the valley stood a cabin, rough-hewn logs against the mountain's shoulder. Smoke curled from its chimney, the scent of pine wood heavy in the cold air. Clara approached, her heart pounding, clutching the ring so tightly it cut into her palm. She whispered a prayer for mercy before knocking. Inside, a man stirred. He was tall, broad, his beard thick as the winter snow. His eyes carried solitude, a life spent far from crowds. He opened the door slowly, startled to see a woman shivering on his porch. In her trembling hand, she held out the ring. "Please," she whispered. "My kids haven't eaten in 3 days." The mountain man, Elias, frowned, not in anger but in surprise. He had lived years without company, nursing his own scars. He looked at the frail widow, her face etched with sorrow, and the ring that gleamed in the pale light. He understood the depth of sacrifice it represented, the weight of desperation. Clara's voice cracked as she continued. "Take it. It's all I have. Buy it. Trade it. Just give me food." Her pride bled through every word, but so did her anguish. She would sell the last piece of her past to keep her children alive. Her eyes brimmed with tears, fixed on his uncertain gaze. Elias took the ring, turning it in his rough hands. His silence stretched, but inside, his heart twisted. He knew loneliness, the ache of loss. To see it in her eyes stirred something buried long ago. Finally he shook his head. "I don't want your ring," he said quietly, "but I'll help you." She blinked, startled, clutching the ring back to her chest. Elias stepped aside, gesturing her. Warmth from the fire licked at her frozen skin as she entered. He opened a chest, pulling out salted meat, flour and dried beans. Setting them before her, he said simply, "Your children won't starve tonight." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks, her knees trembling. She sank into a chair, clutching the supplies as though they were gold. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you help a stranger?" Elias's gaze softened, the loneliness in his eyes echoing hers. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." As she listened, her heart shifted. This man was not just a recluse, but someone scarred by grief, carrying silence like armor. In that moment, Clara realized she had not only found food, but perhaps a soul who understood her pain. The mountain wind howled outside, but inside, hope flickered anew. The fire crackled, warming Clara's frozen fingers. Elias poured her tea, the steam rising between them. She hadn't expected kindness, least of all from a stranger in the mountain. "Your children?" he asked quietly. "How many?" She swallowed. "2. They're waiting." His jaw tightened. "Then let's get them fed." Together they packed supplies into a sack. Clara could hardly lift it, but Elias slung it over his shoulder with ease. She protested, but he silenced her with a steady look. "I'll come with you," he said. "No mother should face this alone." She hesitated, then nodded, humbled by his strength. They trudged through snow toward her cabin. Wind whipped against their faces, the cold biting deep. Elias walked ahead, breaking the path. Clara followed, her heart heavy but hopeful. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine her children's faces lit with relief, their hunger finally eased. At the cabin, her children rushed to her arms, thin and pale but alive. Tears blurred her vision as she held them close. Elias set the sack on the table, pulling out bread and meat. The children's eyes widened, their small hands trembling. Clara whispered thanks again and again, her heart overflowing. As they ate, Elias stood back, his arms folded. Watching them, he felt a pang in his chest, an ache he thought long buried. He had once dreamed of a family, but the mountains had taken that from him. Clara looked up, her gratitude shining. In her eyes he saw the reflection of what he had lost. That night, Clara urged him to stay by the fire. "It's too cold to walk back," she said softly. He hesitated, unused to company, but her children had curled against her, warm at last. He settled into a chair, staring into the flames. The silence was not lonely this time, but strangely comforting. When morning came, Clara brewed weak coffee, offering him a cup. "I can't repay you," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "You already have." She frowned. "How?" He sipped quietly before answering. "By reminding me there's still life beyond these mountains." Her breath caught, sensing the sorrow he carried. The days that followed blurred into survival. Elias brought wood, mended fences, and hunted game. Clara worked beside him, her children following like shadows. Slowly the cabin grew warmer, not just from fire but from shared effort. Clara marveled at how quickly this lonely man had become their lifeline. Her pride still ached when she looked at the ring, tucked safely in her pocket. She had nearly given away the last piece of her husband. Yet Elias had refused it, choosing instead to give without taking. That act stayed with her, whispering of a kindness she had not believed existed anymore. On the third evening, as snow fell gently outside, she found Elias mending a chair by lamplight. His rough hands moved carefully, his eyes focused. "Why live alone up here?" she asked softly. He paused, then answered, "Because it hurt less than remembering what I lost." His voice cracked, and Clara felt her heart ache for him. Clara studied Elias in the lamplight, seeing the pain he carried like a shadow. "Loss doesn't fade by hiding," she whispered. He looked up, surprised by her quiet strength. She met his eyes steadily. "But kindness, it makes the burden lighter." For a moment the room felt less like survival, and more like healing. Elias rose before dawn the next day, chopping wood in the icy yard. Clara watched through the frosted window, her children still asleep by the fire. His figure, strong and steady against the rising light, stirred something unfamiliar in her heart. It wasn't just gratitude, it was the first flicker of Over breakfast, her children chattered through mouthfuls of warm bread. Clara hadn't heard their laughter in weeks. Elias smiled faintly, though he tried to hide it. Clara noticed, and her chest tightened. This man who had lived in silence, now sat in a room alive with voices, and somehow The following week brought another storm, fiercer than the last. Snow piled against the cabin, winds howling like wolves. Elias worked tirelessly, shoring up the roof, keeping the fire alive. Clara stood beside him, carrying water, tending the children. Together they fought the cold side by side, their bond growing in the struggle. At night, exhaustion weighed heavy, but Elias still carved small toys from scraps of wood. He handed them to the children without a word, their eyes lit with wonder, tiny hands clutching the figure. Clara's heart swelled, her throat tight with unshed tears. This lonely man had given her children back their smiles. One evening, Clara found herself lingering by the fire after the children slept. Elias sat across from her, his face softened by the glow. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer empty. "I should have nothing left," she whispered, "but you've given me hope." He looked at her, eyes heavy with meaning. The ring still rested in her pocket, its weight a reminder of her past. She pulled it out, turning it in her fingers. "I thought I had to give this away to keep them alive," she said quietly. Elias shook his head. "Some things are worth more than gold. Keep it. Let it remind you of love, not loss." Her eyes stung with tears. She slipped the ring back onto her finger, though it felt different now, not just a relic of grief, but a promise of endurance. Elias's words had transformed it. She looked at him, and for the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Days melted into weeks. Elias hunted and split wood. Clara mended clothes and cooked, and the children thrived. Slowly the cabin shifted from a place of desperation into a home. Clara marveled at how this man, once a stranger, had woven himself into their lives with quiet strength and unspoken care. One night, as wind rattled the shutters, Clara whispered to him, "You've saved us." Elias shook his head, his gaze steady. "No, Clara, you saved me." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Two broken lives had collided in the mountains, and in their meeting both had found a reason to begin again. The mountains softened as spring edged closer. Snow melted into streams, the forest waking from its long sleep. Clara watched her children chase each other in the thawing meadow, their laughter filling the air. Elias stood nearby, leaning on his axe, his face calm but his eyes carrying a warmth she had come to trust. Clara often caught herself studying him when he worked, the steady rhythm of his hands, the patience in his movements. He carried grief, but he also carried resilience. She wondered if he saw her the same way, not as a widow clinging to scraps of survival, but as a woman fighting to rebuild her life. One evening the children fell asleep early, leaving Clara and Elias alone by the fire. The silence between them grew heavy, not from distance, but from closeness unspoken. She stirred the flames nervously. "You could have turned me away," she said softly. Elias met her eyes, "But I didn't want to." The honesty in his voice made her heart stumble. She looked at him, the flicker of firelight painting his features. For the first time she realized she wasn't just grateful for his help. She was drawn to him, to the quiet strength, and the tenderness he tried to hide. The thought frightened and comforted her all at. The days grew longer, filled with labor. Together they tilled a patch of ground for planting. The children carried water, their cheeks bright with sun. It was hard work, but laughter threaded through it. Clara felt a stirring she hadn't known in years. This wasn't survival anymore. It was live. At night, Elias told stories of the mountains, bears he'd seen, storms he'd endured, rivers that carved valleys. Clara listened, her chin resting in her hand, her eyes never leaving his face. She realized that though his words painted the wild, they also painted him. A man shaped by struggle, yet still standing. The children grew fond of him, clinging to his side when he returned from hunting. He never complained, though his gruff manner masked a quiet delight. Clara saw it in the way he carved them toys, in how he let them ride his broad shoulders. Slowly he was becoming part of their family. Still Clara hesitated. The ring on her finger tied her to a past she could not erase. She lay awake at night, torn between grief and the growing warmth in her chest. Could she honor her husband's memory while opening her heart to another? The question lingered, unanswered, in the quiet hours. Elias noticed her distance, though he said nothing. Instead he worked harder, chopping more wood, hauling more water. Clara realized he was giving her space, respecting the battle inside her. His patience spoke louder than words, telling her that he would wait for her to decide what she wanted. One morning Clara found wildflowers blooming near the stream. She gathered them, setting them in a jar on the table. When Elias saw them, he paused, a faint smile tugging at his lip. In that simple act, he saw hope, the promise that even after loss, beauty could return, and with it, the chance for love. The meadow grew greener with each passing week. Clara's children ran barefoot through the grass, laughter echoing off the mountain. Elias stood at the edge, his heart stirring with emotions he thought buried. This cabin, once silent, now pulsed with life. He realized he had grown used to their presence, and craved it. Clara found her gaze lingering on Elias more often. When he split wood, when he carried water, when he laughed softly at the children's antics. He wasn't just strong, he was gentle, patient, and kind. She had feared asking for help, but now she wondered if fate had given her more than she dared to hope. One afternoon, Clara's daughter stumbled, scraping her knee. Elias knelt beside her, his large hands surprisingly tender, as he cleaned the wound. Clara watched, her chest tightening. It was in small moments like these she saw the truth. He wasn't only saving them, he was becoming theirs. That night, Clara sat by the fire, staring at the ring on her hand. "I still love him," she whispered, voice trembling. Elias, seated across the room, looked at her gently. "You should," he said. "Love doesn't die with a man. It lives in your heart, and it doesn't keep you from finding more." His words lingered like embers. Clara turned them over in her mind, realizing he wasn't trying to replace her past but to honor it. For the first time she let the thought take root. Perhaps love wasn't limited to one lifetime. Perhaps the heart could heal and open again. The children soon began calling Elias uncle. He never corrected them, though the words softened his expression each time. Clara noticed how natural it felt, how easily he had slipped into their lives. The cabin no longer felt divided between widow and stranger. It felt whole, like a family forming piece by piece. Clara's son begged Elias to teach him to fish. Together they stood at the stream, lines in the water. Clara watched from the bank, her heart swelling as laughter carried over the rippling current. Her children, once gaunt from hunger, now glowed with health and joy. Elias had given them more than food, he had given them life. The nights grew warmer, but Clara still lingered by the fire with Elias. Their conversations grew deeper, silence no longer awkward, but filled with meaning. Sometimes his hand brushed hers, accidental yet deliberate. Each touch set her heart racing, though neither spoke of it aloud. The air between them thrummed with possibility. One evening Clara confessed her fear. "If I let myself love again, will I lose everything once more?" Elias looked at her steadily, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Loss is part of living," he said quietly, "but so is, without one the other has no meaning." His words struck deep. Clara lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. For so long she had survived only for her children, believing her own heart was finished. Yet Elias had stirred something she thought impossible. Slowly she began to realize, she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to dream again. The next morning Clara rose early, stepping outside as dawn painted the mountains gold. Elias was already there, stacking wood. She watched him, the strength in his movements, the patience in his silence. For a moment she imagined what life would be if he stayed always, not as a helper but as a partner. The children's laughter pulled her back. They tumbled from the cabin, chasing each other through the grass. Elias turned, his smile faint but real, and Clara's breath caught. It was then she realized he was no longer just a mountain man passing through her life. He was already a part of their story. One evening Clara cooked a stew richer than usual, saving a portion for Elias. He accepted quietly, but she noticed the flicker in his eyes. It wasn't just food, it was gratitude, affection, perhaps even love expressed through her hands. Their unspoken bond deepened with every small gesture shared between them. Later that night, as the children slept, Clara sat by the fire with Elias. The silence stretched full and warm. She finally whispered, "I was afraid to ask for help that day." Elias looked at her steadily. "It wasn't weakness," he said. "It was strength to fight for your children, even when it cost your pride." His words broke something inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of despair. They were release. Elias leaned forward, his hand brushing hers. For the first time she didn't pull away. She let the warmth of his touch settle into her heart, quiet but steady. Spring ripened into summer. The land grew lush, and so did their bond. Clara worked beside Elias in the fields, her children trailing close behind. Their laughter, their labor, their shared meals, it all blended into a life that felt whole. Slowly she realized she had found something she never thought possible again: home. But one afternoon travelers passed by sneering when they saw her with Elias. Their cruel words cut deep. A widow too desperate, a man too broken. Clara trembled, old shame rising. But Elias stood firm, his voice steady. "This family is mine," he declared. His defense silenced the men, and silenced her fear. That night, Clara sat with him on the porch, the stars blazing overhead. "You claimed us," she whispered. Elias nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Because you are mine." Her breath caught, her heart pounding. The world had called her weak, unwanted, but in his eyes she saw strength, belonging, and love unshakable. Her children too saw it. They clung to Elias more openly, no longer calling him uncle, but simply letting him fill the role of father. Clara's chest ached with both sorrow and joy, knowing her husband was gone, but her children had found safety again. Elias had not replaced love, he had renewed it. When summer deepened, Clara walked with Elias through the meadow. Wild flowers brushed against her skirt, the sky endless above. She stopped, turning to him. "I thought I had nothing left," she said softly. He touched her hand. "You gave me everything." In that moment, their hearts met, and the mountains bore witness. As summer stretched on, Clara's children no longer looked thin and weary. Their cheeks flushed with health, their laughter constant. Elias carried Clara's son on his shoulders, the little boy crowing with delight. Clara watched them, her chest swelling. It was no longer survival, it was family, fragile but real. That evening Clara lingered on the porch while Elias mended a harness. The sunset painted the sky crimson and gold. "Do you ever wish for more than solitude?" she asked. Elias paused, then nodded slowly. "I used to think I didn't deserve more, but now, I think I do." His gaze lingered on her. Her breath caught, words tangled on her tongue. She felt the same, though fear held her back. Loving again meant risking loss again. Yet when Elias reached across the railing, brushing his rough hand against hers, the warmth of his touch drowned out the fear. For a moment she allowed herself to hope. The children noticed too. They clung to Elias more openly, their laughter louder when he joined their games. Clara's daughter once whispered, "Mama, he feels like Papa." Clara's heart twisted, tears burning her eyes. She hugged her children close, torn between grief for what was gone, and gratitude for what had grown. A storm broke one night, fierce winds battering the cabin. Clara woke to Elias securing the shutters, his frame steady against the howling dark. She joined him, their hands brushing as they worked. In that storm she realized what her heart had long known. She trusted him, not only with her home but with her soul. When dawn came, the land washed clean by rain. Clara found him splitting wood. She stepped into the yard, the ring gleaming on her finger. "This was once a memory of what I lost," she said softly, "but now it feels like a promise of what I found." Elias looked at her, eyes burning. His axe dropped into the grass. Slowly he stepped closer, his hand rising to brush her cheek. Clara trembled, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle, reverent, like a vow. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt alive again. The kiss broke with her tears, soft but certain. Elias rested his forehead against hers. "You saved me, Clara," he whispered. "You and your children." She shook her head, smiling through tears. "No, Elias, you saved." In that embrace, the wounds of their pasts began to knit into something whole. From then on, their days carried a new rhythm. Work was shared, laughter constant, love unspoken, yet everywhere. Clara's children flourished, running free through the field. Elias's eyes softened with every glance at them, every smile from Clara. Together they built more than a home, they built a future. One evening Clara whispered to him, "I thought no one would ever want me again." Elias held her hand firmly. "I've wanted you from the moment you knocked on my door." She pressed her face into his chest, smiling through tears. The mountains stood eternal around them, bearing witness to their love. Autumn swept across the mountains, painting the trees in red and gold. Clara gathered apples with her children, laughter echoing through the orchard. Elias stood nearby, basket in hand, his gaze warm. The widow who once offered a wedding ring for bread now shone with strength, no longer desperate, but deeply loved. Neighbors visited, surprised at the transformation. They saw Clara radiant, her children thriving, Elias beside her like a steady oak. Whispers of pity faded, replaced by respect. Clara realized she no longer needed to explain herself. Her life was proof enough of the choices that had saved them all. At night the cabin glowed with warmth. Elias carved by the fire while Clara mended clothes. The children played at their feet. It was simple, yet it was everything. Clara marveled at how life, once reduced to survival, had become rich with love. She looked at Elias and knew they belonged together. One evening as the children slept, Elias took Clara's hand. "I thought I'd live and die alone in those mountains," he said quietly. "But you came, and now, I can't imagine life without you." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I thought no man would want a widow with nothing left. But you wanted us." Their lips met again, deeper this time, carrying the promise of a future. The fire crackled, the mountains silent around them, as if blessing their union. In Elias's arms, Clara felt her husband's memory honored, not erased. She realized love had not abandoned her, it had simply come in a new form. Winter returned, fierce as ever, but they faced it together. Elias taught the children to snare rabbits. Clara taught him songs her mother once sang. Their lives wove into one, every hardship softened by love. The widow and the mountain man had built something unshakable in the heart of the wild. The ring remained on Clara's finger, gleaming faintly by firelight. No longer only a relic of grief, it had become a symbol of survival and renewal. She traced it one night, whispering, "You gave me the strength to keep this, Elias." He kissed her hand, answering softly, "And you gave me the strength to live again." Her children began calling Elias Pa, the words slipping out naturally. Elias froze the first time, his eyes wide, then softened with emotion. Clara watched, her heart overflowing. The family she thought lost forever had been reborn, not in the shadow of sorrow but in the light of love. As the seasons passed, the cabin became known not as a place of solitude, but of kindness. Travelers carried stories of a widow and a mountain man, who faced despair and found hope. Clara never sought recognition. Her joy was in the life they had built, in the laughter that never ceased. And one night, standing together beneath a sky thick with stars, Clara whispered, "I once tried to trade my wedding ring for bread, but instead I found you." Elias pulled her close, his voice steady, "And I found everything I thought I'd lost." Their kiss sealed the truth, their love eternal as the mountains. Winter eased, and spring returned with soft rains. Clara's children splashed in puddles, their laughter filling the valley. Elias stood with Clara on the porch, watching the scene unfold. "They're happy," he murmured. She nodded, her eyes bright. "Because they have more than food now. They have family." As the land bloomed, so did their love. Elias carved a cradle, surprising Clara. She traced the wood with trembling fingers, overwhelmed by his quiet devotion. "You thought of everything," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "I thought of us." The future stretched before them, alive with promise. Travelers who once scoffed now greeted them with respect. Stories spread of the widow who had found hope in the mountains, and the man who had found family again. Clara no longer felt shame in her struggles. Her story was not weakness, it was strength, written in every smile of her children. One evening Elias took Clara's hand beneath the budding trees. "You came to me with a ring," he said softly, "and I gave it back. But now,
I'd like to place one there myself. Clara's breath caught as he slipped a simple band onto her finger. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, yes. Their wedding was quiet, held beneath the open sky. Clara's children stood by her side, their eyes glowing with joy. Elias spoke his vows, simply, I'll never let you face hunger or sorrow alone again. Clara's voice trembled as she answered, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed. Seasons passed, their life rich with love and labor. The children grew strong, the ranch flourished, and the mountains echoed with laughter. The cabin that once held despair, now radiated warmth. Clara sometimes thought of the night she offered her ring, and marveled at how desperation had led to salvation. Her ring no longer symbolized loss, it was a circle renewed, unbroken by grief. Elias kissed her hand whenever he saw her gaze at it, reminding her of their beginning. It was never the ring I wanted, he told her once. It was. Clara smiled, her heart full, her soul finally at peace. Even hardships returned, storms, sickness, lean harvests, but they faced them together. Elias's strength never wavered, and Clara's spirit never faltered. Her children grew, knowing love, respect and safety. The family born of hunger and loneliness became a testament to endurance, proving hope could bloom in the harshest places. Clara no longer felt shame in her struggles. Her story was not weakness, it was strength, written in every smile of her children. One evening Elias took Clara's hand beneath the budding trees. You came to me with a ring, he said softly, and I gave it, but now, I'd like to place one there myself. Clara's breath caught as he slipped a simple band onto her finger. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, yes. Their wedding was quiet, held beneath the open sky. Clara's children stood by her side, their eyes glowing with joy. Elias spoke his vows, simply, I'll never let you face hunger or sorrow alone again. Clara's voice trembled as she answered, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed. Seasons passed, their life rich with love and labor. The children grew strong, the ranch flourished, and the mountains echoed with laughter. The cabin that once held despair, now radiated warmth. Clara sometimes thought of the night she offered her ring, and marveled at how desperation had led to salvation. Her ring no longer symbolized loss, it was a circle renewed, unbroken by grief. Elias kissed her hand whenever he saw her gaze at it, reminding her of their beginning. It was never the ring I wanted, he told her once. It was. Clara smiled, her heart full, her soul finally at peace. Even hardships returned, storms, sickness, lean harvests, but they faced them together. Elias's strength never wavered, and Clara's spirit never faltered. Her children grew, knowing love, respect and safety. The family born of hunger and loneliness became a testament to endurance, proving hope could bloom in the harshest places. Neighbors came to call them blessed, but Clara only laughed. We were broken people who found each other, she would say. That's all, yet she knew it was destiny, perhaps, or grace. She had once believed she had nothing left. Now she knew she had everything. On a quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Clara leaned into Elias's arms. I tried to sell my wedding ring for food, she whispered. He kissed her hair, and instead you bought my heart. Their children laughed in the yard. The mountains stood eternal, and their love endured forever.